Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. Today I wish to talk about what our province must do to respond to the climate emergency. What needs to be understood by all is that humanity helped create this climate emergency, and there are many things we can do to address it. Many things already outlined on Manitoba's Road to Resilience series, which I'll be referring to throughout my talk here. As Greens, we think globally and act locally, knowing full well that our actions have meaning and inaction will have dire consequences. We recognize that Manitoba is a small part of this planet and our people constitute a tiny fraction of the world's population. Yet we can confront the climate emergency, and how we contribute to it will be important. We might even inspire other jurisdictions. Following this provincial election, whichever party is the government will be responsible for leading provincial response to the climate crisis. These parties appear preoccupied with cutting taxes while simultaneously promising to spend more than their opponents and pledging to balance the budget. None has a clear understanding of what must be done to address these existential threats. It appears they're sleepwalking into the future at a time when we need resolute leadership to address these challenges with the considerable resources our province and our country have. Listening to our political class makes it clear they think their post-October 3rd responsibility is to carry on business as usual. This must change. Responding to the climate crisis will take more than the work of a few or even a few hundred bureaucrats. It will take more than the efforts of an entire government. It will require mobilization of the resources of our whole society. It demands action from all of us. Our federal Green leader, Elizabeth May, has likened our situation to the challenges in the Second World War. We faced in 1939 this existential threat. Back then, the government led the way in terms of identifying needs, marshalling resources, setting targets, and enforcing them. The fight was not left to the market, and we cannot leave it to the market this time either. All of our institutions, public and private, have a role to play if we're to win the fight of our lives. But the leadership has to come from our elected representatives. The climate emergency represents a greater threat to the world's peoples than the Second World War, as horrific as that was. Our governments must rise to the occasion. We Greens agree with Climate Action Manitoba. For a resilient future, Manitoba must feed ourselves, shelter ourselves, and move ourselves without fossil fuels. We must focus on housing. We need to heat all of our old and new buildings affordably without methane-producing natural gas. Food, we need to feed ourselves locally without fossil fuel fertilizers or fuels. And transportation, we need to move our people and goods without fossil fuels. The Green Party of Manitoba will not form government. However, having a Green member of the Legislative Assembly will ensure that whoever does form government will not be allowed to forget their responsibilities to bring all our resources to bear in responding to these three focal points of change. As a Green MLA, I will advocate for budgets that prioritize greening our economy. Going beyond that, I will fight for the meaningful involvement of all sectors in reviewing existing plans, Manitoba's Road to Resilience series, climateactionmb.ca, and implementing measures to reduce provincial greenhouse gas emissions and strengthening our infrastructure to deal with all the weather, fire, and natural disaster emergencies that will be coming. I will insist that all sectors have a seat at the planning table. Business, labor, First Nations, municipal governments, educational institutions all have responsibilities and all must participate in our discussions. I will insist that all sectors participate. Our provincial government must work with our transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, retail, and energy industries. To reduce GHG emissions, we need to go down by 9% per year up to 2030. That's 9% in 2024. We haven't done 9% in 2023. We must create jobs while providing incentives for adopting electric vehicles, improving EV charging, the network coverage, particularly in rural and remote communities, electrifying our existing bus fleets, our existing provincial fleets, electrifying agricultural equipment, and exploring alternatives such as drone technology, and funding expanded bike lanes and other human-powered transport. Make Manitoba a green energy hub of central North America, providing the lowest GHG emissions powers. This includes enhancing connections to grids west, south, and east, and encouraging solar power and wind development with net metering and long-term agreements, while protecting Lake Winnipeg and the hydro-affected communities around Lake Winnipeg. Improve product stewardship by discouraging the use of single-use materials, implementing deposit programs, increasing availability and trust in recycling programs, decreasing our food waste, and implementing community-scale composting across the province. Support the transition away from industrial animal agriculture by incentivizing small-scale animal producers and growing more plants for human consumption. This is because livestock production in the industrial model we have today contributes 27% of Manitoba's agricultural greenhouse gas emissions. In conclusion, there can be no allowance for business as usual. This is a perilous time in our history of our planet, and as a Green MLA, I will make every effort to hold government accountable for the leadership role it must assume. Thank you so much.